The rationalist philosophy created within the Bauhaus School was celebrated by two American architects, Henry Russell and Philip Johnson, in 1932 with an exhibition at the MoMA in New York entitled International Style. The goal was to make the US public aware of the rationalist solutions that European culture had produced. They did not dwell on the economic and political reasons of Europe, but showed a new international style. From that moment on, within American territory, people began to talk about international style, and this encompasses the principles of rationalist design. In the United States, before this exhibition, the greatest technological innovation of the 19th century was the production system based on the standard object and on the interchangeability of each of its parts with standard pieces, defined as the American system of manufacturing. This new concept gave significant advantages both for the production and for the maintenance of the products. It was a real change of mentality. It was applied since 1850, starting with arms manufacturing companies such as Colt, which created drum pistols, and Remington, which produced rifles. The innovation was used by these companies because they were largely funded by the state, as they were considered essential for national security. For example, if we analyze a Colt weapon, we see that this is made up of many parts, which are made with precise measurements and with very few margins of error. Thanks to this, it is possible to assemble them correctly and without wasting any time. With this system, it is possible to go to any Colt dealer and replace damaged parts, or modify the product to improve it. This is the American system of manufacturing. This type of philosophy was also adopted by other companies outside the arms sector to minimize production costs, such as in the field of watchmaking, calculators, and typewriters. This is a concept that has radically changed the world of production, reducing costs, but risking offering a product with a much lower quality than the same object made in an artisanal way. The American system of manufacturing was presented to visitors during the first Universal Exhibition in 1851 in London, but was applied in Europe much later due to a different consumption system present in the old continent, in addition to the European countries' different lines of thought. A huge step forward came thanks to the spread of the philosophy dictated by Henry Ford, further evolving Taylorism. But let's go in order. What is Taylorism? Scientific management is a theory of management that analyzes and synthesizes workflows. Its main objective is improving economic efficiency, especially labor productivity. It was one of the earliest attempts to apply science to the engineering of processes to management. Scientific management is sometimes known as Taylorism after its pioneer, Frederick Winslow Taylor. Taylor began the theory's development in the United States during the 1880s and 1890s within manufacturing industries, especially steel. Its peak of influence came in the 1910s. Taylor died in 1915, and by the 1920s, scientific management was still influential but had entered into competition and syncretism with opposing or complementary ideas. Although scientific management as a distinct theory or school of thought was obsolete by the 1930s, most of its themes are still important parts of industrial engineering and management today. These include analysis, synthesis, logic, rationality, empiricism, work ethic, efficiency through elimination of wasteful activities, as in Muri, and Mura, standardization of best practices, disdain for tradition preserved merely for its own sake or to protect the social status of particular workers with particular skill sets, the transformation of craft production into mass production, and knowledge transfer between workers and from workers into tools, processes, and documentation. This revolutionary philosophy was adopted in a nascent sector such as the automotive one. The car itself has a very important technical and productive significance, and has marked an incredible step in mankind history. Henry Ford was the man who transformed this sector from being artisanal and slow to be extremely productive and efficient. Thanks to his theory, Fordism, he elevated industrial production, creating what is called mass production. The name Henry Ford is naturally associated with that of Winslow Taylor, who based a new model of industrial organization based on rationalization and efficiency. The key points that allowed the transition to mass production were four. First of all, the study of times and processes to optimize them in the production of the car. followed by the total search for the interchangeability of each individual part. The realization of the equipment that served to facilitate all the work steps. And finally, the creation of a connection in sequence based on many small stations that carried out single and simple operations. For example, the first had the bodywork, the second the engine, the third the doors, etc. Each department was specialized in a single operation. Once completed, the car moved on to the next department. In this way, production times were optimized. Ford came up with this idea in Chicago, where he visited an animal slaughterhouse. Each worker or group of them took care of single operations to be carried out on the carcasses. The results of this model were incredible. The construction of the Model T was passed from 728 minutes to 93 minutes. As the years went by, he refined the technique to unmold a car every 15 seconds. At the same time, the economy continued to grow, and the Model T went from a price of $950 in 1908 to $290 in 1927. Mass production, however, required a continuous expansion of the facilities to be able to lower costs. Henry Ford, however, noticed an important circumstance: the cost of living was rising, but wages were not following this trend. To allow his employees to buy a Ford car, he raised wages from $2.40 for 9 hours per day to $5 for 8 hours per day. Other entrepreneurs did not follow Ford's example, and the cost of living gap continued to widen. Market demand continued to decline in the face of a continuous increase in production. Let's take an example. If the market requires 2 screws a day, and the company continues to produce 10 screws a day, because the assembly line requires it precisely to lower costs, the company will find itself in overproduction. This will lead to the 1929 stock market crash or Great Crash. Mass production was the element that gave prosperity to the economy, especially the American one, until a Black Thursday in October 1929. Between 1920 and 1929, U.S. GDP grew by 43%, and automobile manufacturing became the economy-leading sector. This huge production capacity, supply, was far superior to market demands. Thanks to mass production, companies had a higher profit margin, which, however, they did not redistribute among workers by raising their wages apart from Ford, as I said earlier. Because of this, consumers began to lose their purchasing power. To maintain high levels of product sales, an attempt was made to transform American society, passing from the culture of production to the culture of consumption and workers. Consumption was no longer seen as a vice, but rather as a virtue, thus changing society as we know it today, into a consumer society. One of the first ways to attract new customers was the development of marketing, which had to present new innovative products, never existed before. It was necessary to create new needs and explain to people the product that could satisfy them. Marketing showed new possibilities, not only from the point of view of use, but above all from an emotional point of view, based on status and social differentiation. These are concepts that we know well nowadays. The companies started selling their products directly without going through the wholesaler. And to do that, they had to create packages. A nice packaging could attract new customers. For example, if I wanted to buy a product such as Kellogg's cereals, the company sold the bags to wholesalers, who divided the products into many small portions to sell to final consumers. By eliminating the wholesalers, the cereals were put in packs already portioned, and sold directly to the consumer, just as is done today. The packages had to explain the product, and always be accompanied by the company logo. Other techniques were the prize competitions, and discount coupons. Another way was to reposition products, for example, such as Coca-Cola, which was a product originally created for headaches. A consumer could buy it twice a year, while selling it as a thirst-quenching drink. It could be used up to 100 times a year. It was a resounding success that still exists today, in many forms. The worst technique, however, was consumer credit. Being able to buy a product in installments led 60% of Americans to own items paid for in installments. According to the forecasts of the U.S. government and companies, this flow was destined to increase. This was clearly not the case. The economic disaster involved the United States initially, passing to Europe, and above all to Germany, with which the United States had close economic ties. Trying to stay in business, companies began to lay off workers, causing unemployment to rise from 1 million to 15 million unemployed in 1932. The United States came out of this situation thanks to Roosevelt's New Deal, a plan of state investments, which put the economy back on track. It involved the construction of infrastructures necessary for the state, such as bridges, dams, and motorways. That's all. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or subscribe to the channel if you wish to see other content related to the world of design. See you next time. Bye.